So to start, a little bit about me is how we're going to go, because I really like structure. We're going to talk about Hugging Face, what is behind that famous emoji, what we love about open source, why we think it's important for newsrooms, ethics as well, and then some key takeaways, including some tools that all of you here could use. So who is she? My name, again, is Brigitte. I was a former journalist, and I went to the dark side to communications. So I apologize for that. But while I was doing journalism, some reporting, I was also doing a master's, and my thesis was looking at automation and AI in newsrooms, in particular Canadian newsrooms where I'm from. Because AI, well, automation in particular has been around in newsrooms for a very long time. Think about predictive weather forecasting. It's been around for decades. It's not where it is today, as John pointed out earlier. But that's something that we've been seeing. There's also quarterly company earnings or sports recaps. These are all things that have been going on for years. So what the FA is Hugging Face, because honestly, for the uninitiated, it is quite confusing. Just to go back in time a little bit, back in 2016, our founders wanted to make a fun conversational chatbot. Why? Well, they thought Siri and Alexa they're very useful, but they're also a little bit boring. So they decided to set out to make something a little bit more fun. And the reason behind the name, Hugging Face, well, it happened to be their favorite emoji. So to give you a little bit more information, models, data sets, and spaces all exist on what we call the hub. So this is the space where you can access models and share with the community. Same with data sets. And then we have the spaces where you can build machine learning apps and demos, showcase your research and products. So with the generative AI boom that we have seen this year, just to give you an idea, I added a few numbers. Models, for example, we went from 99,000 in January to 340,000 models. Spaces, for example, we were at 19,000 in January, and we've increased by over 500%, which really just shows this major excitement for AI and open source. So what is the secret sauce behind Hugging Face? Well, there's 3 key ingredients. So there's the hub, which I talked about earlier, which is really the place for everyone to share, discover, create models, data sets, and demos. But then we also have what we call our open science portion. So we have these dedicated research teams who really work to advance open science. They look at new approaches for training, data set curation, and then they work on a bunch of initiatives, and they're directly informed by the hub community. And before I go even further, the hub community, by the way, it really is an AI ecosystem that includes over 70,000 organizations or companies like IBM, Microsoft, Meta, NASA, and even more. University research labs like Stanford, some open source nonprofits, and then also engineers, hobbyists, and people that don't know much about AI, like me, or I mean like that don't know how to code. So with the open science, who's directly informed by the hub, we also love collaboration. So last year we released Bloom, which was by Big Science, a multilingual large language model. And then there's Big Code as well, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So then the hub and open science directly inform our open source teams. So these teams work at standardization and tooling. So there's evaluate, diffusers, and also, since they're informed by both of these, they also look at trends. And all of this goes back into the hub. So it's like a very nice feedback loop. But when we say at Hugging Face that we're on a mission to democratize good machine learning, like what does that mean and how? Well, for us, we really pride ourselves on an open source philosophy. And there's multiple reasons for that. Number one, without a doubt, AI would not be where we are today without open source. Like the rapid proliferation of ideas and the free flowing of exchanges, building from each other's strengths, learning from each other's failures is really thanks to open source in the last decade. This generative AI boom is because of open source. Open source is also accessible and it's inclusive. It lowers the barriers to entry, so people from all backgrounds and affiliations are able to AI. Open source also happens to be transparent. It gives you full visibility on the models, so its inner workings and how it was trained and used. Privacy. You're able to host your models and data on local servers. You don't have to worry about privacy issues or sending your info to black box APIs. And then tailored use. So of course, fine-tuning and training models based on your specific needs, domain. Of course, though, we can't talk about open source without talking about closed source. So what's under the hood with things like ChatGPT? Well, in reality, we don't really know, which can be problematic. Closed source systems will take a vast amount of your data. How is it used? How is it accessed? We don't know. Security issues are often not addressed quickly. We've seen with ChatGPT, for example, some copyright infringement, consent issues. And it also makes it there's an opacity of subtle harms and biases, and we just can't really do any type of auditing of how any of this is used. Not only that, though, I think there's like an ongoing misconception that closed source is actually safer than open source, that open source, making AI open, is actually riskier. This misses the fact that both of them can be used irresponsibly. Closed source systems have just as dire, if not more risk than open source systems. And also with open source, you get to open up the diversity of options, which limits potential harms and biases that could be propagated by one malicious actor. But how do you kind of get away from all of those security and privacy issues and move forward in AI? Well, places like Hugging Face, we really put ethics at the forefront with our open source approach. So the way that we see it, ethics doesn't provide the answer, but it provides a framework for developing the machine learning pipeline and analyzing these things in light of human values so that the machine learning community and developers can really try to take these ethical notions and release them more broadly. So some of these ethical or human values are honor, kindness, inclusion, commitment, cooperation, which are all things that you also see in journalism, right? You're committed to the truth, you want to inform your public, and you want to be, there's integrity in there as well. So open sourcery for newsrooms, what does that mean? I know I'm talking a little bit more about the ethical considerations, but there are so many more things for you all to keep in mind. So first of all, it's cost efficient. It's free or it's low cost, for example, to use Hugging Face and to use different open source tools, which, let's be honest, for resource-limited newsrooms can be important, right? Because I don't really know of any newsrooms that have unlimited amount of resources. Customization. You can tailor it and tailor it to your specific needs, which is very useful for newsrooms as well, catering to their specific audiences. But one of the most important things that I want to point out is the community involvement. So it's tapping into that collective of researchers, developers, hobbyists, and really kind of being part of that healthy AI ecosystem where you can learn from others and share your own knowledge and just kind of advance AI as a collective. And then, I've talked about transparency a little bit, but there's also that flexibility where you're not tied to a single vendor or like a proprietary model. So you're able to really move forward the way that you need it, fine-tune to your newsroom-specific needs, and have a little bit more transparency because, like we were saying earlier with closed source systems, we don't know what's under the hood. Whereas ethically speaking, with open source, you're able to mitigate some of those harms and biases that are present in proprietary models, and maybe promote also more algorithmic fairness. And the last one I want to bring up is local news. As Paul was saying earlier, like if local news is really the backbone of of journalism, we want to be able to tailor to those news deserts or to those communities, cultures, and languages that might need more resources. So with AI, you're able to do those things. But so why should you care about open source ethical AI? Well, first of all, open source and open science can actually enhance your reporting, and I'm not talking about the tools, I'm talking about enhancing how we communicate about AI. So for example, here, our ethics team released Stable Bias to analyze the social representations in diffusion models. And this directly informed an article by MIT Technology Review and a whole investigation by Bloomberg. Dataset transparency, which is one of the bedrocks of our organization, also through open source and open science, directly informed an investigation into the data that was being used behind ChatGPT for the Washington Post. And so when we're talking about dataset transparency, we have a bunch of initiatives like this one, which is Big Code in collaboration with ServiceNow, that looks at large language models for code, developing them responsibly. So here, developers are able to find out whether they're in the data set, and there's permissive licensing, and it gives them the opportunity, or the option if they want rather, to opt out of being included in this data set. So what we really want for all of you is really, and I think someone talked about this earlier, but it's about supplementing your work, not supplanting. Human oversight will always remain essential, like to ensure accurate credit, compensation, and consent, there always needs to be a human in the loop. Because what happens when there's no human? You'll get obituaries calling a person useless. Or if you're visiting Ottawa in Canada, an article will tell you to go to the food bank. These are all things that nobody wants, right? And this kind of depreciates journalism. So just to talk a bit about some of the tools that we have at Hugging Face that might be beneficial for you, we started a couple months ago, it's called Collections, where you're able to curate and compile different tools. So here we have an ethical toolkit for policymakers, ways of filtering hate speech, and then showing biases in ML systems. These are all things that can enhance your reporting. And with Hacks and Hackers, we recently started a DIY AI collection for journalists with tools, again, that can assist you, whether it's transcription or classifiers for understanding bias and toxicity or a stance and opinion. These are all things that you can find on Hugging Face. And then, especially catered for you, we have a lot of initiatives going on for the Spanish language because, we want to make sure that as an open source company that we're very inclusive. So we worked with Platzi, which is a nonprofit, to offer a course in Spanish. We also work on the Burton project, and there's Somos NLP. So these are all things that are really that could be very helpful for you. And if you want to talk about it later, you could find me at the media fair with Freddie. And then again, there's also the opportunity to lower the barrier to entry with low to no code solutions. So there's auto-train on Hugging Face, but then there's also Gradio, which my colleague Freddie will show you on a more hands-on workshop, where you'll be able to build delightful machine learning apps with Gradio, as he puts it in his presentation. Thank you very much, and please join us on Discord.